The phone trembled in Karen Wilcox's hand as she peered through her living room blinds. Her manicured finger hovered over the emergency call button. "They're breaking the rules again," she whispered to herself, watching as Denise Taylor unloaded groceries from her car, parked 12 inches over the designated line in the visitor parking space. And she knows better. Karen, treasurer of the Oakwood Pines Homeowners Association, prided herself on maintaining order in their suburban paradise. At 53, with her blonde bob perfectly styled and her collection of statement necklaces that announced her presence before she even spoke, Karen had spent the last 8 years ensuring every blade of grass in the community met regulation height. She pressed dial. 911, what's your emergency? Karen cleared her throat. Yes, hello. I need to report a parking violation at Oakwood Pines. There's a pregnant woman, who's parked illegally in our visitor spot. I've warned her 3 times about this. The dispatcher's silence stretched uncomfortably. Ma'am, is this an emergency? Is anyone in danger? Well, no, but this line is for emergencies only. You should contact your local non-emergency number or speak with your HOA board. Karen's face flushed red. You don't understand. She's been doing this for weeks. Our CC&Rs clearly state. The call disconnected. Fury bubbled through Karen's veins as she watched Denise, 7 months pregnant, struggling with grocery bags while her 4-year-old daughter skipped beside her. Karen snatched her HOA binder from the coffee table and marched across the perfectly manicured lawn. Denise, Karen called out, waving her violation notebook. We need to talk about your continued disregard for community guidelines. Denise turned, exhaustion evident on her face. Karen, please, not today. I'm just trying to get groceries inside before my shift starts. Karen noticed several neighbors peeking through windows. Perfect. Witnesses to her enforcement of justice. Rules exist for a reason, Karen announced loudly. Section 8, Paragraph 4 clearly states all vehicles must be parked within designated lines. My car is barely over the line, Denise said, shifting her weight to relieve her aching back. I'm 7 months pregnant, working double shifts at the hospital and raising Lily alone while my husband's deployed overseas. Can we please just... I just called the police about this, Karen interrupted, satisfaction flowing through her at Denise's shocked expression. You called the police? About parking? Denise's voice cracked. They didn't take it seriously either, Karen huffed. But this is your 4th violation this month. That's an automatic $150 fine per our bylaws. Tears welled in Denise's eyes as Lily clutched her mother's scrubs, suddenly frightened. From across the street, Mark Johnson emerged from his house. As HOA president, he'd been dealing with Karen's escalating enforcement tactics for months. Karen, Mark called firmly, approaching the women. A word, please. Karen smiled triumphantly, assuming Mark was coming to back her up, but as he reached them, his expression wasn't what she expected. Karen, emergency services are not your personal hit-away enforcement tool, Mark said quietly but firmly, and targeting Denise repeatedly is starting to look like harassment. Harassment? Karen gasped. I'm protecting our property values. Mark glanced at Denise. Go inside, Denise. I'll help with your groceries. We'll sort this out. As Denise and Lily headed inside, Mark turned back to Karen, whose righteous indignation was quickly transforming into something else entirely, the uncomfortable realization that the neighbors watching weren't seeing her as the hero of the story. Karen retreated to her immaculate home, slamming the door behind her. The granite countertops gleamed as she tossed her HOA binder onto the kitchen island. Her husband, Greg, looked up from his laptop with raised eyebrows. Let me guess, he said, closing his computer. Another crusade for justice. You wouldn't understand, Karen snapped, pouring herself a generous glass of Chardonnay. That Taylor woman is deliberately provoking me, and now Mark is taking her side. Greg sighed. Karen, her husband is deployed overseas. She's pregnant and working as a nurse. Maybe cut her some slack. Rules are rules, Karen insisted, scrolling through the HOA Facebook group on her phone. If we make exceptions, property values plummet. Next thing you know, people will be parking RVs in their driveways and painting their houses purple. She began typing a carefully worded post about certain residents abusing visitor parking and how some board members were failing to enforce regulations. She didn't name names, Karen was too clever for that, but everyone would know exactly who she meant. The following evening, the monthly HOA meeting convened in the community clubhouse. Karen arrived early, arranging her documentation on the vacant chair beside her. As residents filtered in, Karen noticed the whispers and furtive glances. She straightened her posture, convinced they were admiring her dedication. Mark called the meeting to order. Before we address the agenda, I'd like to discuss an incident that occurred yesterday involving emergency services being contacted for a non-emergency HOA matter. Karen's heart raced. She hadn't expected this ambush. Our HOA has always prided itself on being a supportive community, Mark continued. Calling 911 for parking violations is inappropriate and potentially dangerous by diverting resources from genuine emergencies. If I may, Karen interjected, standing with her folder. I was simply trying to enforce. Karen, Mark interrupted firmly. The board has received multiple complaints about your approach to rule enforcement. We're concerned is becoming targeted harassment. Murmurs rippled through the room. Karen scanned the faces, searching for allies, but found only uncomfortable expressions. This is absurd, Karen protested. I'm protecting all of our investments. The bylaws clearly state. We've reviewed the bylaws, said Janet, the HOA's secretary. And we're proposing amendments to create more flexibility for families with extenuating circumstances, like military deployment or medical needs. Karen felt the room spinning. This was a coup orchestrated behind her back. Furthermore, Mark added, the board has voted to implement a new process for reporting violations that requires 2 board members to approve before any fine can be issued. Karen's cheeks burned. You can't do that. I've been on this board longer than any of you. An unexpected voice spoke up from the back. Maybe that's the problem. All heads turned to see Denise Taylor, still in her hospital scrubs, standing in the doorway. I apologize for being late, Denise said calmly. My shift ran long because we were short-staffed. Karen watched in horror as Mark smiled warmly at Denise. Perfect timing. We were just discussing the proposed bylaw amendments. Denise took a seat, and Karen remained standing, suddenly aware of how isolated she appeared. I move to vote on the amendments tonight, said Janet. I second, another board member quickly added. Karen felt her power slipping away as Mark called for a show of hands. Every arm in the room rose except hers. The motion passes, Mark announced, effective immediately. Karen sank into her chair, clutching her binder of violations that had suddenly become worthless. But this wasn't over, not by a long shot. If they thought Karen Wilcox would surrender her authority without a fight, they were sorely mistaken. The following week, Karen launched her counteroffensive. She created a private group chat with 5 longtime residents who shared her vision of unwavering standards. She called it Oakwood Pines Preservation Committee. They'd forgotten what makes our neighborhood special, Karen typed, fingers flying across her phone screen. If we allow exceptions for one resident, where does it end? Responses poured in with righteous agreement. Karen felt vindicated. She wasn't alone in her fight for order. Her first strategic move came at dawn. Armed with her camera phone, Karen documented every minor infraction she could find. Mrs. Peterson's trash can left out 6 hours too long. The Rodriguez family's basketball hoop visible from the street. The Thompsons' unapproved wind chimes. And of course, Denise's car, which Karen was pleased to discover parked with a tire touching the yellow line. By afternoon, Karen had compiled a comprehensive dossier of violations. Unable to issue formal fines under the new rules, she instead printed flyers titled Neighborhood Watch, Standards Alert, with photos of the violations and relevant bylaw citations, no names, but addresses clearly visible. After dark, Karen and her most loyal ally, Barbara, distributed the flyers to every mailbox in the community. This will remind everyone why rules matter, Karen whispered as they hurried through the neighborhood. The next morning, Karen sipped her coffee by the window, awaiting the fallout. She didn't have to wait long. Her phone pinged with a text from Mark. Emergency board meeting. Tonight, 7 p.m. Karen smiled. They were rattled. Good. The day passed in a flurry of outraged posts on the community Facebook page. Some residents were horrified by the public shaming. Others voiced support for anonymous concerned citizens standing up for standards. At precisely 6:55 p.m., Karen strode into the clubhouse, head high. The room was packed. Far more residents than typically attended meetings. Mark sat at the front table, face grim. Beside him sat a woman Karen didn't recognize, dressed in a business suit. Thank you all for coming, Mark began once Karen took her seat. In light of recent actions that have escalated community tensions, we've invited Rebecca Zhang, the attorney who advises our HOA. Karen's confidence wavered slightly, but she maintained her poised expression. Rebecca stood. Distributing flyers identifying specific properties and alleged violations constitutes defamation and harassment under state law. Additionally, using mailboxes for unauthorized materials violates federal postal regulations. Murmurs rippled through the audience. Karen felt her face growing hot. The board has received complaints from 7 homeowners, Mark continued. Ms. Zhang has advised us that the HOA itself could be legally liable if we don't address this behavior. This is ridiculous, Karen interrupted. I didn't name anyone specifically. Rebecca fixed Karen with a steady gaze. Property addresses are personally identifiable information, Ms. Wilcox, and we have security camera footage confirming who distributed these materials. The room fell silent. Karen hadn't considered the Johnsons' doorbell camera. Furthermore, Rebecca continued, targeting Ms. Taylor repeatedly after she's requested you stop could potentially qualify as stalking under harassment statutes. Stalking? Karen gasped. I'm protecting property values. An unexpected voice spoke from the back of the room. No, you're bullying a pregnant woman whose husband is serving our country. Heads turned to see Colonel James Richards, their retired military neighbor, standing with a stern expression. My son served with Denise's husband in Afghanistan, he continued. While Adam Taylor risks his life overseas, his wife shouldn't be harassed for parking 2 inches over a line. Applause erupted. Karen's carefully cultivated alliance crumbled as even Barbara avoided eye contact. Mark leaned forward. The board is implementing a restraining order requiring you to maintain 100 feet distance from the Taylor residence and cease all documentation of their property. Karen clutched her handbag, the room spinning around her. This wasn't accountability. It was persecution. And Karen Wilcox was nobody's victim. Karen spent the next 3 days confined to her house, blinds drawn, ignoring Greg's concerned glances. She scrolled obsessively through community Facebook posts, watching neighbors who once backed her enforcement efforts now publicly supporting Denise. A GoFundMe for Adam Taylor's return trip to witness his child's birth had already reached $3,000. The community was rallying around the Taylors while Karen was being villainized. It's not fair, Karen muttered, pouring her third glass of Chardonnay. I dedicated years to this community. Greg sat beside her on the couch. Karen, honey, I think it's time to let this go. Maybe even apologize. She stared at him in disbelief. Apologize for upholding standards everyone agreed to when they moved here. No, Greg said gently. For calling 911 on a pregnant woman. For harassing someone whose husband is deployed. For letting rules become more important than people. Karen stood abruptly. I need some air. She grabbed her keys and drove aimlessly, eventually finding herself at Riverview Park at the edge of their subdivision. As she walked along the water, someone called her name. Karen turned to see Janet, the HOS secretary, approaching. Karen stiffened. If you're here to lecture me. I'm not, Janet interrupted, falling in step beside her. I've been on that board with you for 5 years. I know you care about this community. Then why turn against me? Janet stopped walking. Karen, do you remember why we created the HOA in the first place? To protect property values, Karen answered automatically. No, to create a community where people look out for each other, Janet corrected. The rules were meant to be a framework, not a weapon. Karen scoffed. That's naive. Without enforcement. Did you know Denise has been bringing meals to the Hendersons since Mr. Henderson's cancer diagnosis? Janet interrupted, or that she volunteers at the community center teaching CPR classes? Karen blinked, caught off guard. No, You've been so focused on the 12 inches her car crosses a line that you missed who she is, Janet said. And that's why people are upset, not because you enforce rules, but because you've lost sight of why the rules exist. Karen stared at the water, uncomfortable truths washing over her. The board meeting tomorrow night will vote on whether to remove you, Janet said quietly. I thought you should know. After Janet left, Karen sat on a bench for hours, watching families enjoy the park. Children laughed. Neighbors greeted each other warmly. This was the community she'd wanted to protect all along, wasn't it? That evening, Karen sat at her kitchen table with her laptop open. She started typing, deleted everything, and started again. By midnight, she had crafted a careful email to the entire board. Not quite an apology, but an acknowledgement that her methods had been overzealous and a request to address the community at tomorrow's meeting. Mark's response came swiftly. Request granted. Karen barely slept. By morning, she had rehearsed her statement repeatedly. A delicate balance of defending her intentions while conceding her approach had been flawed. As she prepared for the meeting, a moving truck rumbled down the street. Karen peered through the blinds, watching in confusion as it stopped at the Sanchez's house across from Denise's. Neighbors gathered, helping unload furniture. Karen grabbed her phone and checked the HOA notifications. There it was, a new resident notice she'd overlooked. Welcome Adam Taylor, returning from military deployment. Her blood ran cold. Denise's husband was home early, and the entire community had mobilized to welcome him while keeping it off social media, knowing Karen monitored every post. Karen sank into a chair. She had been so fixated on rules that she'd missed the very community she claimed to be protecting. The community center buzzed with tension as residents filed in for the emergency board meeting. Karen sat in her car watching families enter, people she'd lived alongside for years but somehow never truly seen. She spotted Adam Taylor, still in his military fatigues, armed protectively around Denise's expanded waistline. His unexpected presence complicated everything. Karen's prepared statement suddenly fell hollow. Inside, she slipped into a seat at the back, aware of glances and whispers. Mark called the meeting to order, addressing routine business before announcing Karen Wilcox has requested time to address the community. The room fell silent as Karen approached the podium. Her hands trembled against the wooden surface. For 8 years, she began, voice steadier than she felt, I served this community as enforcement chair. I believe I was protecting what makes Oakwood Pines special. She paused, scanning the faces watching her. Yesterday, I discovered that while I've been documenting rule violations, I missed something important. I missed Denise Taylor bringing meals to the Hendersons during Mr. Henderson's cancer treatments. I missed the CPR classes she teaches at the community center. Karen swallowed hard. This wasn't the carefully crafted statement she'd rehearsed. I was so focused on 12 inches of parking space that I missed who she is, who all of you are. Her eyes found Adam and Denise. Mr. Taylor, welcome home. Her voice cracked. I owe your family an apology. My enforcement crossed into harassment, and for that, I am truly sorry. The silence was deafening. Denise's expression remained carefully neutral. I'm resigning from the board effective immediately, Karen continued. Oakwood Pines deserves leadership that remembers rules exist to support community, not divide it. She returned to her seat, legs unsteady, as Mark thanked her for her statement. After the meeting adjourned, Karen gathered her belongings, preparing for a quick exit, but Adam Taylor approached, his military bearing unmistakable. Mrs. Wilcox, he said formally, may I have a word? Karen nodded, bracing herself. Denise told me everything, he said, about the 911 call, the violations, the flyers. I know apologizing doesn't erase, Karen began. No, it doesn't, Adam agreed. But it's a start. I've spent 15 months in a place where neighbors attack each other over far less than parking spaces. Coming home to find my wife afraid in her own community. He paused, controlling his emotion. That's not the America I've been fighting for. Karen felt shame wash over her afresh. I believe in second chances, Mrs. Wilcox, Adam continued. My unit survived because locals who once saw us as enemies eventually became allies. People can change their minds, their hearts too. I don't expect forgiveness, Karen said quietly. Not yet, Adam acknowledged. But Denise is due in 6 weeks. We'll need neighbors we can count on. People who understand rules sometimes need to bend for humanity. Karen blinked back unexpected tears. I'd like to be that neighbor. Then prove it, he said simply. Not with words, with actions. As Adam walked away, Karen noticed Denise watching from across the room, her hand protectively over her belly. Their eyes met briefly before Denise turned away. Karen drove home in silence, her mind racing with 8 years of rule violations she documented. How many times had she missed the human stories behind those infractions? The struggles, the circumstances, the needs that didn't fit neatly into HOA bylaws? At home, she pulled out her enforcement binder, hundreds of pages of meticulous documentation. 8 years of her life measured in violations and fines. Karen dropped it into the recycling bin. Tomorrow would be different. It had to be. The following Saturday, Karen woke early, her mind clear for the first time in weeks. Greg noticed the change immediately. You seem different, he remarked over coffee. I'm trying to be, Karen replied, scrolling through community center volunteer opportunities on her tablet. She paused at a listing, volunteers needed. Baby Basics class for new parents, instructor, Denise Taylor, RN. Karen's finger hovered over the sign-up button. Would her presence be welcomed or seen as another form of harassment? After a moment's hesitation, she closed the tab. Better to find another way to contribute. Later that morning, Karen spotted Colonel Richards struggling with bags of mulch in his front yard. Without overthinking, she crossed the street. Need a hand, she offered tentatively. The colonel studied her, suspicion evident in his weathered face. Checking for landscaping violations? Karen flinched but held her ground. No, just being neighborly. After a moment's consideration, he nodded toward the wheelbarrow. If you're serious, I could use help spreading this around the back. Doc says I should take it easy on my knee. For the next hour, they worked mostly in silence. Karen's designer capers were soon stained with dirt, her manicure ruined, but she found herself caring less than expected. As they finished, the colonel offered her lemonade on his patio. Adam Taylor's a good man, Richards said abruptly. His unit took heavy fire on their last tour. Lost 3 men saving civilians. Karen nodded, understanding this wasn't casual conversation. Denise has been through hell, he continued. Pregnancy complications, working double shifts, wondering if her husband would come home and box. I never knew, Karen admitted quietly. Because you never asked, Richards replied without accusation. Community isn't just about property values, Mrs. Wilcox. It's about knowing your neighbor's burdens and helping carry them. As Karen walked home, she noticed a small group gathered at the Taylor's house. Adam was on a ladder, struggling with a ceiling fan on their front porch while neighbors held tools and offered advice. Mark spotted her watching and approached, his expression guarded. "Home improvement project?" Karen asked. "The nursery needs rewiring," Mark explained. "Adam's trying to get everything ready before the baby comes." Karen nodded, an idea forming. "Greg's an electrician." "I know," Mark replied. "We called him already." Later that evening, Greg returned home, eyebrows raised in surprise. "You'll never guess where I've been," he said. "The Taylors," Karen replied, "helping with the nursery." Greg nodded, studying his wife. "Adam asked about you." Karen looked up sharply. "What did he say?" "Asked if you meant what you said at the meeting." Greg sat beside her. "I told him you did." "And?" Greg shrugged. "He said actions speak louder than words." That night, Karen couldn't sleep. She scrolled through real estate listings in nearby communities, wondering if a fresh start might be easier than redemption. Around midnight, her phone chimed with a neighborhood alert. Urgent: water main break on Oak Terrace. Multiple homes affected. Volunteers needed with shop vacs, pumps, etc. Oak Terrace, the Taylor's street. Without hesitation, Karen changed into practical clothes and grabbed their wet-dry vacuum. Greg, still half asleep, watched in confusion. "Where are you going at this hour?" "Being neighborly," Karen replied, already heading for the door. She arrived to find chaos. Water flooding the street, residents frantically moving possessions to higher ground. The Taylor's basement was among the worst hit, water seeping through foundation cracks. Karen pushed through the small crowd, vacuum and towel. Adam, knee-deep in water, looked up in surprise as she entered. "I heard you needed help," she said simply. For a moment, Adam just stared. Then he nodded toward the corner. "We're trying to save the baby supplies. Everything else can be replaced." Karen rolled up her sleeves and waded in. For the next 3 hours, she worked alongside neighbors she once reported for violations, all differences temporarily forgotten in the face of crisis. As dawn broke, Denise appeared with coffee and donuts for the volunteers. When she reached Karen, their eyes met. "Thank you for coming," Denise said quietly. Karen nodded, unable to find adequate words. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet, but it was a beginning. 3 weeks passed. Karen found herself settling into a new routine, one that involved contributing to the community rather than policing it. She volunteered at the community garden, helped organize a fundraiser for the flood victims, and even joined the meal train for the Hendersons during Mr. Henderson's chemotherapy. She hadn't directly interacted with Denise since the night of the flood, though she occasionally spotted her at the community center or grocery store. They exchanged polite nods, nothing more. It was progress, if minimal. Karen was weeding the community garden when Jan approached, clipboard in hand. "We need someone to coordinate the summer block party," Janet said without preamble. "I thought you might be interested." Karen looked up in surprise. "Me? After everything?" Janet shrugged. "You're organized, detail-oriented, and you seem to be trying to make amends." Karen brushed dirt from her knees as she stood. "The board would approve this?" "It was Mark's suggestion, actually," Janet replied. "He thinks you have potential once you channel your energy differently." That evening, Karen spread planning materials across her dining table. The annual block party had always been Oakwood Pine's signature event. The one-time regulations relaxed, and the community truly came together. In previous years, Karen had spent most of it documenting violations for later enforcement. The irony wasn't lost on her. As she reviewed past budgets, a notification popped up on her phone from the community alert system. Denise Taylor admitted to hospital. Baby coming early. Volunteers needed to finish nursery preparations. Karen's heart raced. She found herself driving to the hospital before she could second-guess the impulse. The maternity ward waiting room was crowded with neighbors when Karen arrived. Adam paced nervously while Colonel Richards and Mark conferred quietly in the corner. Conversations hushed as Karen entered. Adam noticed her first, his expression unreadable. "I heard the news," Karen said awkwardly. "Is everything okay?" 5 weeks early, Adam replied, his military composure fraying at the edges. They're monitoring both of them closely. Karen nodded, uncertain what to offer beyond presence. "Can I do anything?" "The nursery isn't finished," Mark interjected. "We were planning to complete it this weekend." "I can help coordinate," Karen offered. "Make lists of what's needed, organize volunteers." Adam studied her for a long moment. "Actually, that would be helpful. Denise has everything planned out, but her notes are everywhere." He handed Karen his house key. Her project binder is on the kitchen counter, pink with baby stickers all over it. The trust implicit in that simple key exchange wasn't lost on anyone in the room. Karen felt its weight in her palm. "I'll take care of it," she promised. For the next 18 hours, while Denise labored, Karen transformed. She coordinated painting crews, furniture assembly teams, and supply runs with military precision. She established a communication system between the hospital and volunteers, ensuring Adam received regular updates without distraction. When little Sophia Taylor made her entrance into the world, 5 pounds, 3 ounces of perfect health despite her early arrival, the nursery was ready. The walls were painted a soft lavender. The crib was assembled, mobile dangling overhead. Tiny clothes were washed and neatly folded. Karen was directing the final cleanup when her phone chimed with a message from Adam, a photo of Denise cradling their newborn daughter. The message read simply, "Thank you. Come meet her tomorrow." Karen stared at the screen, tears blurring her vision. It wasn't forgiveness, exactly. But it was an invitation to be part of something new, a community welcoming its youngest member. She typed back, "I'd be honored." As volunteers dispersed, Karen locked up the Taylor home, placing the key under the mat as instructed. She paused on the porch, noticing the car in the driveway, still parked slightly over the line. For the first time, she smiled at the sight. Some violations, Karen was learning, weren't violations at all. They were just life, messy and imperfect and beautiful.